Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like you've been sleepwalking through your own existence, performing a role that was never truly yours to play? Tonight, we explore the profound warnings of Friedrich Nietzsche's 13 truths that most people discover only when the weight of their unlived life becomes unbearable. These are not mere philosophical concepts, but doorways to your authentic self. If this resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe, because by the end of this journey, you'll become a different person. So stay till the end. The first thing people learn too late is that they've been wearing a mask for so long. They've forgotten their true face. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social mask we wear to fit in, to be accepted, to avoid the terror of rejection. But here's what Nietzsche understood with devastating clarity. The individual has always had to struggle, not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. You wake up one morning, perhaps in your 30s, 40s, or beyond, and realize you don't recognize the person in the mirror. Not because you've aged, but because you've become a stranger to yourself. You've optimized your life for everyone else's approval, while your authentic self has withered in the shadows. The second truth: you've been living in what Jung termed the collective unconscious, following scripts written by others, pursuing dreams that were never yours, measuring success by standards you never chose. Think about it. When did you last make a decision that came purely from your inner voice? Not from fear, not from obligation, not from the need to appear successful or good. When did you last act from your center rather than from your circumference? The third realization arrives like a cold wind. You've been energy poor because you've been giving your life force to people and pursuits that drain rather than nourish you. Nietzsche spoke of the will to power, not power over others, but the power to become who you truly are. Yet you've surrendered this power, drop by precious drop, to maintain peace, to avoid conflict, to keep others comfortable. The fourth awakening is perhaps the most painful. You realize you've been living someone else's definition of love, success, and happiness. You've been chasing shadows on the cave wall, mistaking them for reality itself. The modern world has turned you into what Nietzsche called the last man, comfortable, safe, but spiritually dead. You've traded your wild, authentic nature for security, your dreams for stability, your voice for acceptance. But here's what few understand. This pain is not your enemy. It's your psyche's desperate attempt to call you home to yourself. The fifth truth people discover too late is how deeply they've been conditioned to seek validation outside themselves. From childhood, you were taught to be a good person. But whose definition of good were you following? Society's programming runs so deep that most people mistake their conditioned responses for their authentic desires. You were taught to smile when you felt sad, to be polite when you felt angry, to be small when your spirit yearned to expand. Jung understood this process intimately. He wrote about how we project our unlived lives onto others, seeking in them what we've abandoned in ourselves. The sixth realization is that you've been living in projection, admiring in others the qualities you've disowned in yourself, criticizing in them the aspects you refuse to acknowledge within. But Nietzsche saw even deeper. He recognized that most people are so afraid of their own power, their own potential for greatness, that they choose mediocrity as a comfortable prison. The seventh truth: you've been afraid of your own strength because strength requires responsibility, the responsibility to create your own values, to stand alone when necessary, to disappoint others in service of your authentic self. Machiavelli, though often misunderstood, grasped a fundamental truth about human nature. People will respect your boundaries only when you enforce them consistently. The eighth awakening is that your chronic people-pleasing hasn't made you more loved, it's made you less respected, including by yourself. You've been operating from what psychologists call external locus of control, believing your happiness, your worth, your very sense of self depends on factors outside yourself. This is the root of all psychological suffering. The ninth truth cuts deep. You've been addicted to the approval of people who don't even approve of themselves. You've been seeking love from those who've never learned to love authentically. You've been asking for permission to exist from those who are barely living. The tragic irony is that in trying to be everything to everyone, you've become nothing to yourself. In avoiding all conflict, you've created the greatest conflict of all, the war between your authentic self and your adapted self. The 10th realization is that your need to be needed has become a sophisticated form of control. You've confused love with enablement, caring with codependence, strength with the ability to carry others' emotional burdens. But here's where the path to freedom begins. The 11th truth that people learn too late is the profound necessity of conscious withdrawal, what I call the sacred no. Nietzsche spent years in solitude, not as an escape from life, but as a return to life. He understood that sometimes you must withdraw from the noise of the world to hear the whisper of your own soul. This isn't antisocial behavior. It's the most social thing you can do, because you're preparing to show up authentically. Jung spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, rather than who you think you should be. This process requires what he called active imagination, the courage to dialogue with the parts of yourself you've been taught to suppress. The sacred withdrawal means you stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You realize that your inner peace is more valuable than their opinion of your choices. You begin to see that availability is not love, and unavailability is not cruelty. You understand that by constantly being present for everyone else's needs, you've made yourself absent from your own life. You discover the profound difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is seeking others to fill a void within yourself. Solitude is finding fullness within yourself and then choosing to share it. The 12th awakening arrives like lightning. You realize that most of your relationships have been transactions, not connections. You've been trading pieces of your authentic self for the illusion of belonging. In solitude, you begin to distinguish between your voice and the chorus of other voices you've internalized. You start to feel the difference between what you truly want and what you think you should want. This is where Machiavelli's wisdom becomes relevant, not as manipulation, but as self-preservation. He understood that others will test your boundaries constantly, and your response teaches them how to treat you. The art of conscious unavailability is the art of teaching others to value your presence by experiencing your absence. You begin to understand that your time, your energy, your attention are your most precious resources. They are not unlimited, and they are not everyone else's birthright. The withdrawal is not permanent, it's preparatory. Like a seed that must rest in darkness before it can reach toward light, you must sometimes retreat from the world to remember who you are beneath all the roles you play. The 13th and final truth that people learn too late is the most liberating. Your authentic self is not something you find, it's something you create. Nietzsche proclaimed that we must become philosophers of the self, not passive recipients of life, but active creators of our own meaning. He understood that true power is not the ability to control others, but the ability to control your own responses, your own energy, your own narrative. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating all aspects of yourself, including what he termed the shadow, those parts of yourself you've denied or disowned. When you stop projecting your shadow onto others and begin to own it consciously, you reclaim tremendous energy that was previously bound up in psychological defense. This is the alchemy. What you've been running from in yourself contains the very power you've been seeking in the world. Your anger, properly channeled, becomes your passion. Your sensitivity, no longer hidden, becomes your strength. Your need for solitude, no longer apologized for, becomes your sanctuary. Your high standards, no longer compromised, become your compass. You begin to understand what Nietzsche meant by amor fati, love of fate. Not passive acceptance, but the profound embrace of your entire story, including the parts that brought you pain. You realize that your wounds were not random cruelty. They were invitations to develop capacities you never knew you had. The transformation happens in stages. First, you stop apologizing for your needs. You recognize that your needs are not burdens to be managed, but information to be honored. Then, you stop over-explaining your decisions. You understand that people who truly care about you don't need extensive justification for your choices, and people who don't care about you don't deserve it. You develop what I call sovereign presence, the ability to remain centered in yourself regardless of the emotional weather around you. You stop absorbing others' anxiety, anger, or disappointment as if it were your responsibility to manage. You learn to say no without guilt, yes without resentment, and I don't know without shame. You discover that uncertainty is not weakness, it's honesty. Most profoundly, you begin to trust your inner compass. Jung wrote about the self with a capital S, not the ego self that seeks approval, but the deeper self that knows your true path. You start making decisions from this deeper place, even when others can't understand your choices. You realize that your intuition has been trying to guide you all along, but you've been too busy listening to everyone else's opinions to hear your own wisdom. Now comes the sacred return, not as the same person who withdrew, but as someone who has remembered their true nature. You re-enter the world not with neediness, but with fullness. Not seeking completion through others, but offering your completeness as a gift. The relationships that survive this transformation are the ones worth keeping. They were built on truth, not on your willingness to diminish yourself. The paradox of authentic living. When you stop trying to be everything to everyone, you become something precious to the right people. When you stop seeking approval, you become genuinely magnetic. When you honor your own needs, you become capable of meeting others' needs from a place of abundance rather than depletion. You understand now that love without boundaries is not love, it's enabling. True love requires the courage to disappoint others when necessary, to hold space for their growth rather than their comfort, to model authenticity rather than compliance. Your new relationships are based on mutual respect rather than mutual need. You attract people who appreciate your depth rather than those who exploit your availability. You find yourself in conversations that nourish rather than drain, in activities that energize rather than exhaust. But perhaps most importantly, you develop compassion for your past self, the one who people pleased, who sought validation, who betrayed their own needs in service of others' comfort. You understand that this self was not weak, but wounded, not selfish, but scared, not wrong, but simply uninformed. You realize that your journey through inauthenticity was not a mistake. It was a necessary part of learning what authenticity actually means. You had to lose yourself to find yourself. You had to experience the pain of living someone else's life to appreciate the joy of living your own. The sacred return is marked by several shifts. You stop explaining your worth and start embodying it. You stop defending your choices and start making better ones. You stop seeking permission to be yourself and start granting it freely. Your presence becomes calm but not passive, strong but not rigid, open but not naive. You develop what spiritual teachers call discriminating awareness, the ability to discern what serves your highest good and what does not. You begin to see that your struggles were not punishments but preparations, not obstacles but offerings, not mistakes but lessons in disguise.